Welcome, beautiful, to the Creating Change podcast with Emma Bradford. Creating change to fall back in love with ourselves and life. Each episode, I'll be offering insightful stories, concepts, and practical takeaways to inspire your day, reconnecting to the authentic essence within. Are you ready, lovely, to embrace yourself even more and awaken to the magic life has to offer? Let's dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of Creating Change with Emma Bradford. Thank you for joining me today for this very big topic of negative self-talk. Now, if you've been following my work over the years, you will have seen that this is a topic I have shared a lot about. And if you're new, well, welcome. Thank you for being here. And this is a topic that I have studied in depth. And it's something that I've struggled with a lot over the years, personally, like negative self-talk, like many people. This is a huge topic where we can often get stuck in these loops of criticizing ourselves, shaming ourselves, blaming ourselves. And I've learned a lot along this journey, especially the last 11 years working with this professionally as a topic with clients and really looking into how we can start stepping out of this loop. So what you're going to hear in today's episode is a clip from a live class where you can hear me talk a little bit about the inner critic, that negative self-talk, that part of us that likes to judge and shame and blame, and how to step out of that, and also why it's important to listen to it. This is the thing, it's one of the biggest teachers. People often skip over this step and miss this. This is the thing, when we look at the inner critic, the negative self-talk, with a curious mindset, and really find out what's underneath that, we start to recognize that there's so much more, and there are many different gifts that it's actually offering us. It's helping us to understand ourselves at a much deeper level. So sit back, enjoy this clip from this live online class that I did a while back, and let's dive into the topic of negative self-talk. So sometimes we can have these beliefs of, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving, I'm fill in the blank, I've heard it all in the sessions, and so many people think that they're alone in these beliefs and in these thoughts, and they're literally saying this. Every client is saying more or less the same thing, just in slightly different words. Underneath, it's all to do with this: I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy, or I'm like feeling a lack at some level in terms of themselves. And this is the thing, this is what the inner critic, that negative self-talk, loves to focus on. It's the lack and the comparison and the limited perspective of ourselves and the world. And I'm going to be specifically focusing on the I am statements today and the perspective that the negative self-talk can have on ourselves. So rather than the world, because obviously we can have many beliefs about the world and about others, but today's topic is more about self-talk, like negative self-talk. Like, how do we talk to ourselves? What do we say to ourselves? So much of what we're actually saying to ourselves is repeated. Just like this continuous loop, and it just goes on and on and on, and it's repeated, and it's like the same thing the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day, and the same thoughts and the same beliefs pop up. Now, in the self-awareness space, there's a lot of focus on just ignore the inner critic, that negative self-talk, like just push past it and ignore it. And whilst on some level that can be helpful sometimes, in a sense that is kind of bypassing it and missing the gift that it offers. And yes, the inner critic does offer gifts. It's just disguised in a funny way. It's disguised in a way that essentially what it's saying underneath, there's an underlying message, and it's saying to you, go on, are you going to believe everything that I'm telling you, or are you going to live your life regardless? Are you going to connect to love regardless? Essentially, that's the message underneath. Yet sometimes, and often, like what we do is that we focus so much on the story and we believe that to be true, and we live life according to that story, forgetting that we are actually the writer, that we can rewrite it. So what I want to share today is a quick, simple tip that can really help us like get out of that loop. Though first, before using this tip, it's really important to start reframing the inner critic, like start seeing things differently and start transforming our relationship with it. Because if we start seeing it as this big thing, like, oh, I'm this and I'm that, and we're taking it as gospel, and we're living our lives according to it, or we notice that we're talking to ourselves in a negative way, and then we beat ourselves up even more afterwards for thinking negatively. It's like, oh, I was just thinking bad about myself. I shouldn't be doing that. We're just continuing the cycle. We're just shaming ourselves for having negative self-talk that was often about shame and blame in the first place. It's just this continuous cycle. So it's important to really look at it through different eyes and start opening up, even if in the beginning that's hard, like just opening up this new perspective just for a moment. Like, I wonder, what if this negative self-talk is one of my biggest teachers? Just consider that for a moment. What if negative self-talk is one of my biggest teachers? Yes. A teacher on how not to live life, a teacher on not to take everything that it says as gospel, a teacher in highlighting any limiting beliefs that we might have, especially from childhood. That essentially that's what the inner critic is doing. It's repeating and bringing up to our awareness limiting beliefs that we have picked up on earlier on when we were younger. So if we heard something in the playground as a child and people were laughing at us, or we didn't understand something, then maybe we decided in that moment that we're stupid. And we said to ourselves, oh, I'm stupid. And then what can happen sometimes is that belief can pop up in the form of negative self-talk later on. If we don't deal with it and we don't really look at the root cause, it can pop up again. And then that's the go-to self-criticism. And we say to ourselves, I'm stupid. I'm stupid. And we're just repeating a pattern from when we're younger. Sometimes when we hear criticism or judgment or what we perceive at the time to be criticism or judgment from parents or caretakers, like if they were angry with us about something, or they were stressed or overwhelmed, or we as a child we did something or created a mess or did something that wasn't helpful, and then they shared their perspective on that, and sometimes that can come out in a way that feels very harsh for a very young child. So maybe they said something along the lines of like, oh, don't be silly or don't be stupid. Then in that moment, sometimes, not the case for everyone, but sometimes people decide in that moment, I'm stupid. So then again, like we're essentially what we're repeating are these decisions, these beliefs that we've created in childhood, like whether that's something we've heard someone else say to us, or whether that's something we've decided about ourselves according to a situation that we didn't really understand. Essentially, at the core of all of it is us deciding that, though there can be influence. And what I've noticed that often how we criticize ourselves has a very similar tone to how we felt criticized by our parents, and how we praise ourselves has a very similar tone according to how our parents praised us. we're just repeating the pattern, we're repeating it. So it can really go down to the specific words as well. Like the words that I use to praise myself and give love to myself are very similar to words that my parents would use with me. And the same with the criticism as well. This is something that so many people experience. And I've seen this time and time again in sessions with clients as well. So if we're saying to ourselves, I am this, I am that, I'm ugly, I'm stupid, I'm blah, 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 like whatever the inner critic is saying, like first step is just to get curious and to see the inner critic as a teacher. It's a teacher, and it's not something to run away from. It's not something to bypass. It's not something to shove away and ignore and like, oh, it's bad, it's bad. Essentially what it is deep down is the inner child wanting to communicate something from the past. It's a messenger. It's wanting to communicate how it felt in the past, and it's just come up again in the moment by a certain trigger or a certain experience that is similar, that's popped up. So then that gets fired, and then that negative self-talk comes in. So that pattern continues. So that's the first step, is just to make sure that we really acknowledge it, we learn from it, and we can see it as this wonderful teacher first, before rushing to techniques to get rid of it. The more we do that, the more we transform our relationship with it, the less we'll need techniques to get rid of it, because it ceases to be this big issue. It's like, oh, there I go again. There's some negative self-talk. Okay, like what's really true? What's really true here? So I'm going to be sharing a few sentences that can be really helpful. So that's one, what's really true? Like just to clear away any of the judgments and the assumptions and the generalizations and everything that the mind loves to do, is just to delete and distort and generalize. So just getting back to like, okay, what's the reality? What's really true? Like what's the actual situation? What the mind loves to do is just to delete and distort and generalize. Am I missing part of the picture? Am I overlooking something? And another thing that I wanted to talk about, and the reason why I called this like like a quick simple tip to move away from negative self-talk, is in NLP we have the de-identification pattern, which is one of the linguistic tools, and it can be really helpful to move away from any negative self-talk. So when we're saying to ourselves, I am, fill in the blank, and if there's a negative phrase there, we can ask ourselves, is that all that I really think I am? Aren't I more than that? So even just that sentence, aren't I more than that, can be really helpful. Because often when we're focused on a problem, or we're focused on an aspect of ourselves, or a habit, or something that we've done, or the way that we do things, or like just how we are, or like physical appearance, this is a big one where a lot of judgments can come up. Sometimes the focus can be so limited, and we're just focused on one thing, and we're focused on the problem, or what we perceive to be a problem. And just by focusing on that, we're missing everything else. This is why asking ourselves questions can be so helpful. It interrupts the pattern, breaks that loop. So like, I'm this, I'm that, oh, I'm stupid, blah, 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 blah. That repeated loop. And we ask ourselves the question, aren't I more than that? Aren't I more than that? What am I that's not? And then whatever the previous statement was. So for example, I'm stupid. Is that all that I really am? Aren't I more than that? It's not. And then whatever the previous statement was. So for example, I'm stupid. Is that all that I really am? Aren't I more than that? What am I that's not stupid? This is a thing. We're like a puzzle. I like to see human beings as a puzzle. We're made up of all these different pieces, all these different parts, all these different qualities, all these different aspects of ourselves. We're not just one thing. When we're considering everything like the personality and all of that, if you're just focused on the very core essence, that light, that soul, that being within, then of course there's that one thing. So looking at everything in this human experience, we've got in the human aspect, the human realm, and this personality, this ego that we have many different qualities. We've got many different beliefs. We've got different parts of ourselves, different qualities that come out in different situations. And they're all interlinked and they're all part of us. And when we're only focused on one thing, and especially one thing that we consider to be a problem, then that's when it can be a little bit not very kind and not very gentle and not the best thing really, because we're just focused on problem and we're just forgetting that we're so much more. So there you have it. Obviously, there was a lot more to the class, and that was a little clip from the class, and I continue to talk more about it. Though that was one of the biggest parts of the class, and the main point of it was really looking at how we can see the inner critic through different eyes, and also have a quick tip, a quick tool to step out of that loop when we need to. So essentially, the inner critic is the inner child, bringing to our attention limiting beliefs, fears, emotions. And when we ignore the inner critic, we're ignoring the inner child. So when we pay attention to it and get curious and be like, okay, where did this come from? Isn't this interesting? Then we can find out more information. Those of you who have heard the story about the turquoise trainers would have heard me talk about this. I've mentioned this story quite a few times. And I was buying new trainers in a shop and I saw these incredible turquoise trainers, really bright, the best color ever. And I really wanted to buy them. And I was reaching out to pick them up and have a closer look. And I noticed my inner critic, that negative self-talk, starting to pipe up and say, oh no, you don't want to stand out. Be careful. You don't want to get any shoes that are too bright. And it was bringing this fear to my attention. Now, I could have listened to that and not bought the trainers, or I did what I did is I got curious and asked myself, okay, where did this come from? And I suddenly realized that it was my inner child coming up in that moment. It was wanting to feel safe because many, many years ago at school, I used to be teased according to my shoe size because I'm a very tall woman. And when I was younger, I was towering over a lot of the younger boys. So, of course, they were teasing me about my height, my shoe size, which is not particularly big, though at that time I was towering over them, and this was a thing to point out. And as a child, I felt unsafe. I felt that I didn't belong. So here I was many years later buying trainers, and there was my inner child coming up wanting to feel safe. And I could bring some tenderness to myself in that moment when I realized that. And I could also rewrite the story, and I bought those trainers regardless. So learn, get curious, and then also use that quick tip that I suggested in the clip to really step out of any negative loop stories that might be arising. This is a huge topic, negative self-talk, and there's so much more that I can share. Though for this podcast, I will leave it there. Thank you so much for listening. And this is such an important topic. Please share this. Virtually every single human being on this planet at some point has experienced negative self-talk. So please do share this with a loved one if you found this useful. Every share makes such a difference. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You can send me an email at info@emmabradford.net. I'd love to hear your questions and your shares. And if you want this podcast to continue, if you benefit from these episodes, then please do make a donation. You can find the PayPal link in the description. That really helps out. These episodes are not free to produce. They do cost me money, though I offer them for free because I want to gift something to you. Though if you feel you want to give something back, you're more than welcome to make a donation, however much or however little. Though even a simple share via WhatsApp or by email, sending the link to a loved one makes all the difference. Thank you so much, and I'll connect with you next time. Sending much love. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, beautiful. You're amazing. All resources and links can be found on my website, www.emmabradford.net. Link is in the show description. Do come and join my community and share your takeaways from this episode. I'd really love to hear. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time, I wonder, what magic will you experience in life today?